Vivek.
Hi Akshara.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's lovely to have you here at Oddbird.
I'm also very happy to be here.
How's your weekend been?
It's been good. Yeah, I had a very good performance, I thought, of the quest.
Yes.
And I think what was also more nicer was the little discussion we had post the show, where you had some questions to ask the audience members, and how that led from one to the other was quite interesting. I enjoyed that. I thought it added a lot of value to my engagement of performing the piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that too, actually. And we were just chatting a little bit earlier
Right.
about those specific moments in your career that led you to this juncture where you created the quest. And it was a very different set of conversations that evening when you performed the quest, and a very different one right now. I was wondering, how would you see that graph panning out for you?
Right.
Not in terms of making this particular play, but just specific moments that have been pivotal in your career.
Right. So, I mean, if I were to talk in relation to The Quest, which is also a play that I perform and also written by, I thought a similar journey happened a few years before that. I think it had its seed in 2011 when I was part of a book reading for the launch of the book. This book called The Child Man, written by Ashok Malhotra. And it has two sections to the book. The first section is called The Story, and the second section is called Reflections. So in the first part, called The Story, he talks about three characters, Duryodhana, Bhima and Balarama, where each of them are talking in first person. And I happened to read Bhima for that book launch. And back then when I was reading Bhima, something was very attractive. And I kept going back to that text, even after the event in my house. And I slowly recognized that I think there is something that is resonating within me in relation to Bhima, and I felt this strong desire to do something with it, in the creative space, but I didn't know how or what. And it also felt like it's voicing something within me, which is maybe not being voiced in my life. That was also the point that I was interested in Koodiyattam, which also has an event, that kind of sparked that. There was this performance of Koodiyattam that was happening at Rangashankar in Bangalore, and I was sitting, I think maybe in the fifth or sixth row watching the play. And as the play progressed, I found myself, come down to the first row, sitting on the stairs. And I think, and the reason for that was the actor who was performing, Suraj Nambiar. And I thought he brought such depth to his actions that it just was so drawing. And I felt I can't do this as an actor, and I want to be able to learn how this is done. So that kind of started my curiosity with Koodiyattam and wanting to train in it. And later that year, I was fortunate to get this INLAX India Theatre Award, which is a year-long scholarship if you have to train in any form or on a theatre project. And so I found this frame, or rather conceived this project where I thought I could train in Koodiyattam, and the training in the form can inform the form that will help me make this play called Bhima. And that initiated a long journey for about 3 hours. 3 years, sorry, much longer than 3 hours. So that took me through, it was a very difficult time also, those 3 years, because to begin with, I didn't have any reference point of someone else having done something like this. And I was also very alone because I was the only person doing it. Of course, I was supported by people who trained me. And during that phase, I think meeting Kanhailal ji at Kalashram, Manipur was a very special event, because he saw a lot of value in what I was trying to do. And he kept telling me that, be patient, don't hurry it. It's okay if you have to take one more year, because I think there is value in what you're doing and what you're searching. So he really gave me a lot of encouragement and support. And when that comes from a person like Kanhailal ji, it gives you a lot of strength.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was there for the first time, I was there for about 16 days. He was having a master course then. And, the end of it, we were supposed to, make some payment for your stay and food, something very minimal. And I was getting ready to make that payment. And Usha Kantaji, who was the manager then, um, he asked me to sign on an invoice and said that I have to receive money. So I was like, no, I am supposed to pay. What are you saying? So he said, no, Kanhailal ji has told me that I should be paying you something.
Yeah.
And then when I met him and I told Kanhailal ji that I cannot be doing this, he said, no, I've seen you, I've seen your work, and I want you to take this as a token of encouragement from my side. So an event like that, inspires me even today. For someone to do something like that, and kind of you felt looked after, or you felt that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And so when I went on that journey of training in Koodiyattam, and I was training in a 20-minute sequence only, but just doing that over and over again, and then trying to see how I have perceived that form in my body can be redirected into a physical language or a movement language, which is not as codified as Koodiyattam is, so that it's accessible for anybody. So that was the formal experiment, and the subject was Bhima, and then I knew that Veena Pani ma'am has made a play called Impressions of Bhima much before that. So I met her, and to also know how she has looked at the character. If I am looking in similar ways, then it's not going to be. And she was very kind, and she was very gracious to share the script with me. And when I read it, I realized, okay, this is not the route I'm taking. So I'm talking about another aspect of Bhima, which was really the vulnerable side of Bhima. And that's how, and then, going through the intensity of Koodiyattam training also brought in a lot of injuries in the body, difficult. I just had a daughter at that point, and I couldn't even hold her for very long.
Yeah.
But then, one thing led to the other. There was a problem, and then you kind of persisted through it. And before I premiered it in 2015, I found it important to go to Kanhailal ji and show him the piece. So I go there, and I think they have a theatre. So I think we'll be doing it in the theatre. Kanhailal ji being Kanhailal ji, he said, no, yahin pe kar do, samne, in the courtyard, in the open. And I have a co-performer. He does the percussion. I was like, well, how do we do it outside? It's going to be difficult to hold the space and everything.
Yeah.
And I start performing, and I see Kanhailal ji get up and walk out.
Oh God.
And then he comes back and he looks at me and he goes out. So I know clearly that he has not liked what I'm doing. So we finished, and then he said, "Chale, sham ko baat karte hain. I'll see you in the evening." And I'm waiting for it to be 4 o'clock, 4:30, so I can go meet him. Everybody else had nice things to say. And then when I met him in the evening, he just told me about how do you construct an action. And he gave me the example of a farmer in the field trying to call his colleague. The first time he calls him, he doesn't listen to you. Then you give another call, and then finally another call, and he listens to you, and then the next action begins. What was so special about that was that he didn't have anything nice to tell about what I did. But the way he gave me this feedback, and he just told this much, he didn't tell anything in relation to the play. Two things happened. One, I got what he was pointing to. And the second thing is, I was very, very inspired to go back and work on the piece. And that happens very rarely. And I think someone like Kanhailal ji has that capacity to do it like that. And I came back, and of course, the work premiered a month later, and it did well in terms of performances across India. We also went to a festival in Colombo, etc. After that, creation of Bhima was also a journey where I felt that, I was putting in everything that I have understood as far as actor training is concerned into creating a piece, and how it has helped me train myself. And when I started out wanting to train myself in Bangalore, which is, around 2008 and 9, I didn't have anybody in Bangalore to go to. And somehow I wasn't very inspired to go to a drama school. whatever work I saw that came from drama school back then didn't inspire me. And then I was working with Abhishek Majumdar at that point, and he had come back from LISPA, and I was training with him. So I thought, okay, LISPA seems to be the place to go, and I applied. I also got admission, but I was also searching. I was going to different places, trying to train myself. I couldn't wait till I went, and that's when I met Adil Hussain in Assam. And when I met him, I was convinced that he's my teacher. And I think inherently I was interested in some kind of an Indian approach to training. And so I decided to not go to London, and that I will follow whatever Adil sir has asked me to work on. And so that journey continued like that. So when I finished Bhima, I felt, and I had made this promise to myself, that if I reach a place where I can add value as a trainer to upcoming actors in Bangalore, I'll make myself available. So after 2015, after the premiere of the play is when I thought I should start doing that. So I looked at all my training programs, and I found many intersections between my training with Kanhailal ji in Koodiyattam, yoga, contemporary dance, a little training I've had in Kathak from Adil sir, etc., etc. And then I kind of designed a module, and I thought I'll offer it free of charge, but I will select the participants if those many came forward and applied. And that's exactly what happened. And we did a month-long exercise where we worked quite intensively, and had a little presentation post that, where we also had some experiments done, and we had somebody come as an invited audience and respond to the work. So then that kind of started a cycle of me training and facilitating, and very often people who would come for a few days would want to continue. So then we didn't know how long we're continuing, and suddenly we know it's 6 months. And then it happened with two of them who came to me every day for about 6-7 months, and then we made these little pieces. And I was working out of a garage of a school back then, and we made a little presentation. We called it Kuch Chota Isa because it was quite small, and small things made, small attempt, all of that. And that led to something else. And then another important thing that happened at that point was that somebody, Prashant, who's the CEO of a company called Invisible Bed, he happened to see one of our works, an experimental work around poetry. And he said, I have an office space. We finish work by 7 p.m. So if you want to come to the office, move the tables around. If you have enough space, you can work out of there. So that space was a little bigger than the garage space that we had. So we thought we'll go there. And then in a month or two, he moved his office downstairs. So then we started coming a little early. And so that's how, which now is our studio space called our theatre studio. We have that space to ourselves. And it's really because of that a new kind of phase of work began, where now I'm also not just an actor and actor trainer, but there's also a studio space to work with, to look after, to sustain, etc. So that training went on for some time, and I think in 2018 I was sensing some kind of stagnation with my practice, and I felt I need something to shake me up a little bit, That's when a friend I was working with happened to talk to me about the work center of Jerzy Grotowski and Thomas Richards. I knew of that institution, but that they're offering a month-long master course and that one could apply. And that's how I applied and went there in 2019, which was the birth for the quest to happen. Yeah. Sorry, I think I went on for a long time.
No. It's a very, it's an interesting thing for me to hear actually, because you mentioned Kanhailal ji, and just watching his work was transformative for me as an audience member. So I can only imagine what it was like actually working with him.
Right.
And now that you mention it, I'm able to draw certain connects with what I see in the quest, although it was developed under the Grotowski method. I was wondering, you spoke a lot about your training as a performer and what it does to your method as an actor. Do you find these things sort of slip into your facilitation as well? In the terms of, not having a Western template and focusing more on what can be developed in-house, and because I think it's important to be open about the disillusionments we see as creators, and to work from that to develop something that makes sense. So is there anything different that you do as a facilitator that one would normally not see?
I think so. See, the couple of things that I do, and that's something I've seen in wherever I've been to train, which is that the structure that you work within is not so predetermined. There is a structure, but the structure gets revealed or as one flows through the process. So, for example, when I'm facilitating a workshop, right, I have a overarching structure in mind. Okay, this is what it will be like. But my attention is more into what is going to happen now. Who are going to be the participants? What are they bringing with them? And how does that inform the space? And this trust to journey through that not knowing. Right? And that's what brings in excitement for me. Because most often they're quite revealing, or it facilitates processes for revelations to happen, not just for me but also for the participant. So that's something I do, because I think in India and in our training processes, etc., we are more fluid people. I see more fluidity, I see more elaboration of things in time, which are definitely operating under structures, carefully designed structures sometimes, but really also allowing for the other to happen, which is not fixed but transient in nature. So I think that's something that I bring in. And the other thing I think I bring in is to always allow for personal reflections to happen, is to allow for the person, however he or she is, to not go away from that, but to maybe really go a little deeper into who you really are. That is something I'm always interested in. So I'm also interested in being able to make contact. So often when I'm facilitating or taking workshops, I don't gravitate towards large number of people. I go maximum 9, 10. That's about it. That's what I like. It's not like I've not done with 25 people, but I like to keep it like that. I feel the process is a little more enriching then, or I'm able to offer more. Yeah, if that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Speaking of allowing the other to happen, for me at least, because in the not so much the journey, but the experiences that I've had with training and creating work myself, it obviously goes hand in hand. Creation comes with a lot of tearing paper up, throwing it away, rejecting things, feeling like you're a failure. How do you I'm curious to know, how do you balance the doom that you face with creation? How do you personally overcome that?
It's very difficult. I think a mixture of a couple of things. One is I think I have capacity to persist, which might also get irritating for some people. And I think, especially after my daughter was born, there is also a different level of patience that I'm capable of, I think. And the third is, sometimes if things are not working beyond a point, I try and look for, for lack of a better word, signs.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, for example, this new work that's set to premiere early next year, it's a collaboration with Kalashram Manipur. There's an artist from there with whom I'm working. Both of us are performers. I've written it, and both of us have come together to create it. It's taken about 2.5 years to make it, and there have been various people involved in it. At some point, in the beginning it was just me and him, then there were more people, and then people changed, and then we didn't know where it was going, etc. And then, in fact, last June, it felt like, okay, it was an experiment. We tried our best. It's not happening. Nahi ho raha hai. But having had previous experiences of not succeeding, I told myself that this might also not work. Be prepared for it. So you do it because you're interested in the investigation. And then later this year, earlier this year in February, there was a very special artist who came to the studio to facilitate a workshop called Prabhat Bhaskaran. Is a very interesting artist. One can speak at length about him. He lives in Japan and farms there. Married, has 2 children, and he was visiting India for about a few months. And he happened to be at the center at the studio to take a workshop. I've known him from before, but not been in touch over the years. So his workshop was an extremely disruptive process for me. Because you didn't know what was happening, where this is leading to, and sometimes it's just conversation, sometimes you're doing something. So it was disorienting. And he said on the last day we'll have an open rehearsal and we will call people. And he was interested to know what each of the participants is interested to create and make it. And whatever you show him, he'll say, beautiful. This is beautiful. And then, so on the last day, and I said, I think I should not be in it, because if everybody's in it, then we lose the outside perspective, just in case somebody's parked the vehicle somewhere or something like that. So one day I cooked. So he said, okay, then you cook, that as part of the open rehearsal. So I was cooking chicken at one point. There was an animation that was happening. There was singing. There was an enactment. There was a reading. Somebody drew a mandala on the floor. So all of this kind of became a part of the open rehearsal. And people who came for that evening, everybody felt something very special happened in the space that day, including me. And something really strange also happened. The 2 people who had not RSVP'd to the evening came up. And the last offering was a song. And these 2 people who came up, they completed the song in the end. And we had no clue how they knew the song. Because that song comes from a tribal hamlet in Attapadi in Kerala. And then he went back and he came with a violin and he started playing the violin. And he said, we were just walking by and we felt we must come up. We just came up. So something like that of a happening happened.
Yeah.
Okay. And so during that process, he happened to share this song. And the moment I heard that song, I felt, I think I can complete that play. Now I can't explain that beyond that, because even I don't know what it was, but it's the strong feeling that I think I have an entry point into that play at least.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that the song features in the play, but I think it kind of weaved few complexities in a very simple way that I was struggling with. So the following month I just wrote it. So then there was a birth of something that we thought was over. And then I had my collaborator from Kalashram, Tyson, come to Bangalore. We had a 20-day residency and we found something and we felt, yeah, I think we found it. And then I went there in September, October, and we have kind of gotten to where it is now. So yeah, so this thing about failing has always been there, and in those moments you don't feel nice. What I try to do is to just try and bring in some objectivity. Go to this thing of why were you interested in it in the first place, and then to also sense the energy in the room if we really want to do it, because often when we are making work, funding is a big part of it. The money also determines whether you do something or you don't. So yeah, so one learns through these processes, and then later on when you hit upon an idea, you want to first think through the journey of it well beforehand. That this is what we're signing up for?
Yeah.
And then make an informed choice. Earlier it wasn't like that. You felt an impulse, you went with it. But I think now, having a studio space and having other collaborators, there are more things at stake. So you try and take a more informed decision. Yeah.
That's a very valuable insight, actually. Not preempting, but sort of just keeping an eye out for what happens in the future potentially.
Right.
And I felt that very strongly with your facilitated session the other day. You did an audience reading room with us, and it was an interesting script. That's why I wanted to jump right into it.
Right.
Because I was curious to know how would we just explore the immigrant experience. We did Halsden High Street, of course, by Abhishek Majumdar. And I was curious to know how we would place ourselves in the immigrant experience at a table in Delhi, but the play is in London.
Right.
There's so many layers. It's not very straightforward. But it's different, I think, when you have a bunch of actors because their purpose in the room is the same, to
Right.
attack the text.
Right.
But when the energy I felt previously in the reading rooms is that the curiosity just fuels such an unusual engaging with the text, and it was very valuable for me, that session as well. I was wondering what your experience was like, because I don't think anybody asked you
No,
what
yeah.
it was like.
No, surprisingly, I mean, I was also curious because I haven't done anything like that exactly, how this is going to be. And I think I had a few questions for you and to also Parul as to
Yeah.
how this is really done.
Yeah.
So I asked Parul said, no, do you have some warm-up exercises? I think you can have some warm-up exercises before you start reading and things like that. So yeah, I was also looking forward to it. Like I was saying, no, that not knowing space. Let's see how this is going to pan out. But I surprisingly really enjoyed it. Also, we couldn't start on time. A few people came a little later. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for a couple of reasons. One is that that we could do this thing of, some plays read very well. Some good plays also don't read well. So this is a play I know that reads well, and I knew people will enjoy reading it.
Yeah.
So to be able to read it first on a table, and then mark like a stage 2 to go to the stage, because I kind of value that.
Yeah.
I feel going to the stage is a step.
Yes.
So first you figure it out here, and then I told them, okay, you could also see how you want to use the space.
Yeah.
And the little discussion we had about where you want to place where, what, I mean, and so inform the image, which I thought was a different, like a next level into the play. So that thing I liked. And I also liked how we got personal.
Yeah.
On
That's
gender, when like you were reading Kareem and so on and so forth, which I thought was again, allowing for that some revelation to happen, which is something that I always value.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that I really liked. And I think when such things happen, people in the room also come together a little differently.
That's very true.
Yeah,
I
because
definitely
by the
felt
end of that 2.5, 3 hours,
yeah.
it felt I think some of them said also it feels like a community. I don't know why, or something like that. We were just 5 people.
Yeah.
So yes, that's something that I really enjoyed, and for these reasons, yeah.
Yeah.
And I also like the name, Audience Reading Room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to tell the person who coined it that
Yeah.
they did a really good job,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it tends to pique curiosity for everyone,
Yeah.
including
Yeah,
my
because
own.
usually it's called play reading session,
Ah,
things like that. But audience reading room is interesting.
yeah,
Mm.
for me as well.
Yeah.
Again, just a little while ago, you mentioned, embracing that space of not knowing.
Mm.
And I was just reflecting in my own head about how when my engagement with theatre really began, the whole world entered this phase of not knowing, which means
Okay.
COVID, of
Right,
course.
right.
And I was just thinking, now we've had some time to look away from that and go back to some orthodox forms and some really new, interesting forms of engaging with theatre. And is there any direction that you see the world of theatre taking in a post-pandemic and increasingly digital world? There's so many new, exciting and not exciting things happening. But I'm curious to know what that feels like for you, because you've had so many years, training and acting and facilitating, which is kind of a full circle. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Initially, I thought, as the pandemic was kind of finishing, that people would really want to come out to watch live performances. But that didn't quite happen, at least not in Bangalore. And then you saw that the digital space was getting a lot. It doesn't attract me as a creator. At the same time, as somebody who's part of the ecosystem of theatre making at large, I feel that all kinds of experiments should happen, and innovation must happen. And so I like that that's happening. But personally, as an artist, I don't feel too attracted towards that. Even to have something projected as part of a performance is not something I've done so far. Maybe I do in the future, but at least for the moment, it doesn't.
It's not your thing.
It seems like it, at least for now. Yeah.
There's another thing I wanted to talk about, and talking about digital media got me, reminded me of that question. one of my favorite parts of the quest is when the Kaho Na Pyar Hai section happens.
Right.
Because for me, people of my generation, it's such a seminal point in our lives
Right.
that it takes us directly back to the entire world kind of opening up, which I also believe was the same thing for Varun.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, Varun, of course, is Varun.
Right.
It's not Vivek.
Right.
Does Vivek have any, specific pieces of work or movies that shaped who he is and what his idea of art should be? Not Kaho Na Pyar Hai, something else.
Right. Not Kaho Na Pyare, something else.
Because that's mine.
Right. I think I'm drawn to work which give you an elevated kind of an experience and which makes me feel more deeply human. I think I'm drawn to works like that, be it as an audience or largely as an audience, that's what, and then you aspire to create something like that. Yeah, but to give you an example of a play, there are many works, something about some work, something else about something else. But I think I'm drawn to works which are, even though there is spoken text, but a certain kind of a total presence of the actor, which is, I'm drawn to clarity of actions. I'm drawn to organicity. I'm drawn to work where I don't see the craft, where the craft is invisible. I'm drawn to works which in simple ways can point to complex things. And I'm also very drawn to sincere presentations, which might not be very, complex in design and all of that. It could be a very simple thing, but if one can sense a certain kind of authenticity in the performer doing what he or she is doing. So I'm drawn to that. Sometimes, in fact, what's immediately coming to my mind is when this artist from Delhi, Anup, was there with his piece Upar Wala Kamra. He performed it at the studio. In fact, I was just talking to him the other day and he was saying that out of all the shows I've done, that show at the studio was the most special one. And it was an extremely moving experience. We were hardly, I think, 5 or 6 people, unfortunately, that evening at the studio. Usually we have 25, 30 people. For some reason, we didn't have that day, but it was a very, very special show, like a special experience in the theatre that everybody in the room, I think, would continue to remember. And where, for example, the craft was invisible to me, and there was no light design. So moments like that, sometimes moments in a rehearsal, you don't even have an audience. Maybe you're the only person witnessing it, and you feel some truth was revealed in that action. I think that's why I do theatre, really. That's the most drawing thing. That's what you're chasing all the time.
Just, this space of not knowing feels inherently risky, at least from my perspective. It's a vulnerable space. It's
It is.
And I was wondering about how, firstly, you create that sense of safety for yourself in a facilitation scenario in order to be able to create it for the participants in the space.
Right. I mean, if you honestly speaking, I think it's informed by 2 things. One is, I think, practice of having done it. Like, I know that I don't walk into any session with a plan. I'm exactly yahi karunga. And never do that. And second is to trust. Trust yourself.
I can't imagine walking into a session without a plan.
I understand. Because Adil sir, because that meeting that I had with Adil sir, way back, I was very young, I was 23, 24. And that's also an age that's very impressionable kind of a thing. And I went to the book of questions, really. And so I used to be like this tale, khana bhi kha rahe saath mein ho. So he also appreciated me after a point. So he would take me in the car. You can come with me till the hotel, then you come back in the car. So we get that time when you're in the drive. So he told me this, trusting yourself is hard work.
Yeah.
And I tell that also in my sessions when we get to a point. Yeah, and to really, I don't know if you want to call it faith or something. And that's the thing also how you're dealing with failure, because that trust is what is your weapon, so to say. Fail bhi ho gaya to kya hi hai? Matlab, death is also as important as birth, no? To appreciate birth, we must be able to appreciate death, really. To genuinely be able to appreciate birth. So I feel that, and that's what, for example, this Navarasa workshop that I take, is every time I take it, it's like a spiritual practice for 2 hafta. Because I tell this, and then I'm also witnessing each of these human beings going through, such remembering difficult scenarios and so on and so forth, where I tell them that, it's important that if you have chosen to be an actor, then you really have to be able to occupy this place, which is equidistant from every emotion.
Yeah.
And that you're equally open to allow each of these emotions to come in for you to embrace them. You can't be judgmental, and that begins with you not being judgmental about yourself and the way you feel about certain things or many things and about yourself, and to let go of that shame that you feel or fear that you have and so on and so forth. So when you go through that with all of them, and with the Navarasa workshop, it's also difficult to go by plan. कि कोई एक करके थोड़ा हिल गया है तो रुकना पड़ेगा. You have to support that person at that point. And we say, we'll do it tomorrow. Like, for example, there was this girl who was in the session and she said she forget embracing Raudra rage. She said, I cannot see anybody get angry like that. If something happens to me, I get triggered or something. So I said, okay, fine, you can step out. And then there was a lunch break, and then she wanted to talk to me, and I spoke to her. But I still keep nudging a little bit. Okay, because I want something to open. Yeah. And we had a conversation, and then she was in agreement. Okay, मैं बैठती हूँ, कोने में बैठती हूँ, या मैं आपके साथ बैठती हूँ, बैठो. And by the end of the workshop, she not only witnessed, she did Raudra herself, and she made a big jump as an individual. Art तो बाद में बनेगा, but as an individual, it was a huge leap that she took. So these things happen, and I think it happens a lot because you allow to be okay with that not knowing. And yeah, like you said, this thing about, this immediate instant gratification space, capitalism is doing that to us all the time. And this person who has the space, who's given us the space, he runs this company called Invisible Bed. So he said something, I'm sure all of us know it, but just the timing of when he said it, etc. He said, we as human beings only move from convenience to more convenience. We will never come backwards. And that's the trap we have to be aware of. So one of the things that I do is we sit in a circle and then I take a moment, and people who've been in my sessions must have observed this. You might be expecting me to start speaking, but I don't speak. I'm just a little quiet for some time, sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes a minute. And then I start speaking, or I start. So that's one thing that I do. I don't hurry that. I don't rush that moment. Suddenly that moment, that little practice also makes everybody a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And in that moment of them being uncomfortable, I think they become a little more themselves. It also allows me to be more myself, because I'm also coming from somewhere, with something. And then suddenly that begins the moment of, I don't know. And then it begins. And then we finish. I do this thing that I get a request. I don't kind of force everybody, but eventually everybody participates in their own way. We again kind of sit in a circle, and then we say, let's place our hand on the floor, and then take a moment to thank yourself for having chosen to do whatever you did in the session or participate. If you feel like thanking everybody else in the room, you can do that. Take a moment to also thank the space, because the space is here, we could do this, what we did. And then, if you feel like closing your eyes, you can do that. And then also to not rush it.
Yeah.
To not do it like, I know it's a so-called repeated action, whatever, but to not do it like, अच्छा 30 second हो गया, okay bye bye. To really take time. So I also take different time, and I also tell everybody else to take your time. So and we don't close that so-called ritual until everybody has done it. And once you've done it, then I usually fold my hands and just look at everybody and just do a little thank you. कभी बोलता हूँ, कभी just nod करता हूँ. And I don't rush that process.
Yeah.
It takes maybe 2 minutes only. इतना लंबा कुछ process है नहीं. Because sometimes, you never know through that course of time in the session, some things must have come up. Because we focus a lot on getting into character, getting on stage, getting something started. But I think we need to focus equally on getting out of character, exiting stage. Stage is a place where there's entry and exit. Both are equally important, not just this. So we need to pay attention to the exit. And what are you exiting from? To just recognize, to take cognizance of that moment is something that I mark the end of sessions.
That brings me to something we did in drama school. I know you're not a fan.
No, I have nothing against drama schools. I was also there teaching at DSM last year. ऐसा कोई मैं नहीं गया उतने.
No, but it really helped me sort of transition into a fairly unfamiliar space of learning, because I had trained in Indian traditions until then. But it was, what we were told essentially is that motivation is going to fail you one day. So stick to discipline. Which I thought was not just really useful technique for creating characters, moving in and out, which is very important, but also life in general. And I found that sort of trickling into how I do things normally, including stuff like, as we were discussing just a little bit before we sat down together, that do I have to blink it? Do I have to order it? Can I go and just get myself that piece of paper or that chocolate or whatever? But I also think that there's so much around us that's constantly telling us to consume more, that somehow it's impacting how we consume art, which is meant to be slow and meant to be at a certain pace and not just little capsules that you just consume and then you don't know where it goes. You don't know if you retain it, you don't know if you've processed it. But is there, how does one get over that sense of, I need to do this now, or I need to see this now, and have a sense of just sitting back, enjoying something, or just consuming a perspective, so to speak?
What's really coming to my mind right now is that when we talk about this as a practice to have in the arts, I really liked how it was done here. Meaning that when I asked when will the doors be open, you said around 5:30, which is an hour before. I thought, okay. So that for me is a sign of it not being a very transactional activity. I come in, I meet some people, spend some time, there is some value to that. And then you had the performance, and then there was also that so-called talkback boliye, response boliye, even if it was not designed or required, something like that is not required for other performances. But the fact that was valued and that was not rushed and that they could stay back after that was a very nice example of how we can negotiate that. Or, as a response to that instant gratification kind of a thing, where if someone chose to go for a performance, then it is not a rushed entry, dekh liya, chalo bhag gaye. But if the space can be designed and also the entry and exit is also facilitated in a way that it is allowing for something more to happen from that evening. Because the person who's made it or the team that has made it has given it some thought and worked over some time and created that. And basically I'm interested in organicity. Like you talked about discipline. Discipline is great. I have great regard for discipline. At the same time, sometimes discipline can also become rigid and take away something that's organic, which I think if we need to find a balance between the both, which is that thing of knowing and there's not knowing.
But how
also.
do you not know is my question.
How do you not know? Like you do not know tomorrow what time the sun will rise. It's a fact.
Yeah.
We
But
just need to recognize it.
how are you okay with it? Because
I know,
trouble being
because
okay
we're not,
with not knowing.
because we're not educated like that. Our training is not like that, to not know. It's about knowing. You need to know how much time that Swiggy guy is going to take to get to me. If he says, oh, it's got delayed by 1 minute, we start getting upset. That's the trap.
Yeah.
So we just need to see the trap and work against it, or have an alternative. We must invest in thinking like that and
Yeah.
seeing what we can do in our own ways to challenge that, because that's where we're getting trapped. You know, and this is I'm saying this including myself, right? If I'm very hungry, it's, "क्यों late हो गया भाई, कहाँ फंस गए वगैरह वगैरह." So I think to how do you just need to train yourself, and I think nothing much to do. Like, you know, you just don't have a plan for a day, maybe, and just see how it goes by. And you just maybe discover that I was a little more alive today.
Yeah.
Just walk down the street where you've not walked, not with an agenda, just to walk, just to see things around. And I also give this example, you know, like see, from here I go towards that end. Now I know exactly what the starting point is, I know what the end point is, I know the route. But it's also a fact that every time I walk from this point to that point, the journey is not going to be the same. I'm going to see different people, different color. So many things are different. So to be able to see that, that is the not knowing in the journey. But we are so caught up in the known that we just go from this to that to this to that.
Yeah.
So वो journey miss हो जाता है. So that's how I think we can train ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that then again, you know, comes to this thing of actor training, etc., which is to kind of extend your awareness to other things. And
Yeah.
try to.
Yeah, I can't do it in
Practice it.
all spheres of my life yet.
Sure.
In some.
I'm also trying.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm able to do it all the time.
I know, but it's in the sense that it does, I think, like you said, figuring out that trap is really important.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
how far can you go before none of you really is left in whatever it is that you're doing? Is every interaction then just a transaction? Or is there something more going on in how you're viewing yourself and the world and moving around in it as an individual before getting to the art of things? So, yeah, it's great. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for sitting down with us.
No, it was a pleasure, and I think I also feel deeply honored, really.
Oh, no.
That
The honor is ours.
No. I really feel honored because, yeah, I mean, everybody here at Oddbird seems to be interested in what I do, and also I feel valued, and so I feel honored. So thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing your work with us. It's been
Pleasure.
such an exciting weekend for us. For me particularly, I can say that because I did one session with you and then I saw the quest.
Right.
And it's been a longer journey, of course, particularly because we've seen bits of your work and there's been conversations and then finally having you in this space.
Right.
But it's been, the quest has been very fulfilling, shall I say.
I'm glad.
Good. So on that
Thank you.
note, I'd just like to wrap up for today and let everyone know that if you want to see more practitioners, theatre, music, dance and other kinds of arts, hop down here at Oddbird. This is just the beginning of a lot of really exciting things we have planned. This has been Vivek Vijayakumaran and I have been Akshara. If you like this, give us the usual, a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel, share this forward, and for more information, you can click on the description. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you, and yeah, do consider coming to Oddbird. This is a fantastic space. Lovely people working here, running the space. They have an event every other weekend happening here, from theatre to music to dance, and also the session called the Audience Reading Room, for people who want to dabble with reading scripts and exploring a piece of text. Yeah, so please keep coming and extend your support to such spaces for them to sustain and thrive. Thank you.